Hello, friends. This is Confessions with Amy, and I'm glad you're visiting my channel. Here we share new confessions every day.
I was halfway through prepping for a meeting when my phone buzzed. It was my dad, and he never calls during work hours. Something about the silence before his voice kicked in made my stomach tighten. "Rena," he said, not even a hello. "Your grandfather had a fall. He's in the hospital in Somerville. Broken hip. They're keeping him for a few weeks. Someone needs to be with him." "Okay," I said, confused, still staring at my presentation slides. "Is he okay?" "He'll live," my dad said bluntly. "But he needs someone there, and we can't cancel the cruise." I blinked. "The cruise? You mean the family cruise? The one we all planned last year? The one leaving in 3 days? We can't get a refund, and your brother and his kids have been looking forward to it. This is the only time we all get together, Rena. And you're not married, you don't have kids. It makes more sense for you to stay behind." It was like he was reading off a script, one where I played the role of the spare. Not the daughter, not the sibling, the filler character. "So, you want me to miss the cruise? And take care of Grandpa? Alone? You know he likes you best," he said with a forced chuckle, like that would make it a compliment. I sat there frozen. This wasn't a question. This was an order with the illusion of choice. It always had been with my dad. I was the one who understood, the one who helped, the one who didn't make a fuss. And God forbid I made a fuss now. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I just showed up at the hospital the next morning with a duffel bag and a charger I nearly forgot. Grandpa didn't recognize me right away. His meds had him drifting in and out, and the nurse handed me a clipboard full of papers I didn't understand. I signed them anyway. No one else was coming. By the time my family's flight took off, I was hand-feeding my grandfather lukewarm mashed potatoes in a room that smelled like antiseptic and wilted carnations. No one called that day, not even to check in. I watched the sunset from the parking lot, phone in hand, waiting for a text. Anything. Nothing came. And I told myself it's fine. You're being dramatic. They'll call tomorrow. But deep down, I already knew I had been left behind. Again. And this time something inside me started to crack. The first few days blurred together. Hospital lighting turns minutes into hours and hours into nothing. Grandpa drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes he thought I was his sister June. Sometimes he'd wake up in panic because he didn't recognize the room. I calmed him down every time, held his hand, made dumb jokes he didn't laugh at. The nurses started calling me sweetheart and darlin', like they could sense something soft in me cracking. I wasn't sleeping much. I wasn't eating either, not really. Coffee from the vending machine, graham crackers from the nurse's station. I showered in the hospital bathroom with a towel I'd bought at a gas station on the way into town. I remember thinking, I'm not living, I'm buffering. But still, I waited. For a call. A message. Anything. And then it came. Day 4. I was sitting on a folding chair outside the hospital, finally catching some air, when I opened Instagram. Top of my feed. My brother Jace. Shirtless, tanned, drink in hand, standing at the edge of a cruise ship pool. His wife, Danny, in a floppy sun hat and matching smile. My parents in the background, holding cocktails with those dumb paper umbrellas. Caption. Best vacation ever. Hashtag family first. I swear I felt my body go cold. I stared at it for a long time. That caption. Best vacation ever. They weren't even pretending to miss me. Not, wish Rena could be here. Not, sending love to Grandpa. Not, thinking of you. No. Best vacation ever. Without me. I clicked through the rest of the photos. Slideshows of paradise. Jace ziplining. My mom at a wine tasting. My dad at the blackjack table. Everyone smiling like nothing back home was broken. I didn't cry. I don't think I could have if I tried. It wasn't sadness. It was something colder. Something quieter. I locked my phone. I remember looking up at the sky. It was pale, almost gray, that color right before it rains. And I said out loud, to absolutely no one, they don't love me. Not really, because if they had, they would have stayed, or called. Or at the very least, left a chair empty. But the truth was blinding in its simplicity. They only loved me when I was useful. And now, I was just a placeholder, a babysitter in scrubs. So that night, when the nurse came in and asked, "You want me to stay with him for a few hours so you can rest?" I said no. I stayed. Because I couldn't stand the thought of him waking up and finding himself alone too. And maybe that's when I made the real decision. Not to leave him, but to leave them. They had chosen their vacation. And I would choose my dignity. After the photo, I stopped opening Instagram. I stopped checking my phone at all. No more hoping for missed calls. No more refreshing messages that were never coming. I started counting things instead. The number of times Grandpa asked where my dad was. The number of ice chips I spooned into his mouth. The number of nights I went to sleep in the stiff vinyl chair, wearing the same hoodie, socks still on. 6. That was the number of days they were gone. 6 days I didn't matter. 6 days I was erased. On the 5th day, one of the nurses, the only one who called me Ms. Calloway instead of Honey, looked at me while I was folding Grandpa's hospital gown and said, "You're a good girl. Most people don't show up like this. Not even for their parents, let alone a grandparent." I wanted to say, they didn't ask. They told. But instead, I just smiled like it didn't sting. Because saying the truth out loud made it real. And if I was being honest, I didn't know what hurt more, that they expected me to do it, or that I did it anyway. They came back on Sunday. I knew because my phone lit up with a message from my mom. "Mom, we're home. Can't wait to see you. Let's talk soon." "No, thank you." "No, how's your grandfather?" "No, we missed you." I didn't reply. The next day, Jay sent me a Dropbox link. Photos from the cruise. No context. No message. Just pictures. Meant, probably, to make me feel included. Instead, it felt like I'd been stabbed with confetti. That night, I packed my bag. Quietly. Efficiently. I kissed Grandpa on the forehead while he slept, and left a note for the night nurse. I wasn't running away. I was choosing not to stay where I was invisible. I didn't go back home. I drove to Charleston and checked into the cheapest Airbnb I could find. The room was damp and smelled like mildew, but it had a door that locked, a bed of my own, and a sliver of moonlight on the wall. I sat on the floor and pulled out a notebook I hadn't touched since college, and on the first page, I wrote one sentence. "No one is coming to save you. So start saving yourself." I spent the next week building a plan. Slow, steady, stubborn. I started applying to remote jobs in marketing, anything I could do without needing to see another Calloway for a long, long time. I reached out to an old mentor from school. I even emailed a client I used to freelance for and told them I was available again. Every little move felt like a piece of the broken version of me falling away. And on the 7th day, while they were unpacking their souvenirs and probably rehearsing their "how grateful you should be" speeches, I was already gone. My first full-time contract came from a woman named Azra Whitmore, a brand strategist based in Austin. She found my old freelance portfolio and said she liked my voice, said it sounded like someone who's been through something and isn't afraid to bite. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She offered me 2 months of work, enough to get by, barely. I took it before she could change her mind. My Airbnb turned into a month-to-month sublet. The landlord didn't ask questions. He just said, "No parties and don't feed the raccoons." It was small, and the water heater screamed when you turned it on. But it was mine. Each morning, I'd wake up, make tea on the stovetop, and sit cross-legged at the folding table, writing copy for brands that didn't know me and didn't care. That part felt like relief. No expectations. No guilt. Just output. I didn't hear from my family again for weeks, until my birthday. "Mom, happy birthday, sweetheart. Hope you're doing okay. We should all get together soon. Grandpa's home now." I didn't respond. 3 minutes later, my dad texted me. "You've made your point. Enough is enough." There it was. Not "are you alright?" Not "we're proud of what you did." Just the same old playbook. Guilt. Control. Reset. They wanted me to fold. I could almost hear my father's voice in my head. "Don't be dramatic, Rena. Families fight. Just come home already." But I wasn't coming home. Because there was no home to come back to. Not for me. A month later, Azra offered me a permanent position. Remote. Full-time. with benefits. I bought a used desk off Craigslist and upgraded my setup. I invested in a proper office chair, not because I needed it, but because I deserved it. I started walking every evening along the harbor, watching the sailboats drift in like thoughts I didn't have to catch anymore. One night, I passed a couple sitting on a bench. They were older, hands clasped, leaning into each other's warmth. The woman was telling a story about her sister, something about a family trip, and she laughed so hard she snorted. And the man just looked at her like she was made of gold. That's when it hit me. This is what family is supposed to feel like. Not duty, not silence, not being used up and forgotten. Love doesn't keep score. Love doesn't send you to care for the dying while it drinks cocktails at sea. By the time Grandpa passed, I was already settled in a new life. The hospital called me, not them, because I was still listed as his emergency contact. I drove back to Somerville one last time. I held his hand for hours. I told him everything. I told him nothing. And when he was gone, I left quietly. I didn't call my parents. I didn't attend the funeral. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. It had been 14 months. 14 months since I last stood in a room with any of them. 14 months since I let their voices shape the way I saw myself. By the time they reached out again, I was no longer the same Rena Calloway. My work had grown. My name was on 2 viral brand campaigns. I was making more than I ever had. I had my own apartment, my own rhythm, a peace they never even noticed I needed. And then, like they always did, they came knocking. Not literally. Not yet. First came the breadcrumb texts. Jace, hey, haven't seen you in forever. Let's get coffee when you're back in town. Mom, so proud of everything you're doing. I saw your name on that ad with the dog and the astronaut. How cool is that? Dad, finally, I admit we weren't fair. Let's put it behind us. We're still family, Rena. You know that. That last one? That was the moment I knew. Not only had they finally realized they'd lost something, they were trying to drag me back before the version of me they built stopped existing altogether. Too late. When I returned to my hometown, it wasn't for them. It was for me. Azra invited me to speak at a Women in Business panel in Atlanta, and I decided to stop in Somerville for one day. No warning. No announcements. Just curiosity. I parked outside the Calloway house around 7 p.m. Same porch light, same cracked driveway. But I didn't go in. I just stood across the street, watching, breathing. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't want to go inside. Not because I was angry, but because I was whole. The house didn't own me anymore. They did everything they could to make me stay in that role. The one who bends, sacrifices, apologizes first. But I had broken the mold. And once it's broken, it never fits the same again. I left without knocking. 3 weeks later, I got a handwritten card in the mail. From my mom. We miss you, honey. We're sorry. We didn't know how much we were asking. Please come home for Christmas. Things aren't the same without you. I read it once. I read it twice. Then I put it back in the envelope and slipped it into a drawer. Not out of bitterness, but because closure doesn't always come with a speech or a dramatic scene. Sometimes, closure is just deciding not to go. This Christmas, I spent the day on the Oregon coast with a small group of people I chose. Writers, designers, weird souls with strange pasts like mine. We made dinner, played records, built a fire. Someone brought a bottle of wine shaped like a violin. I laughed so hard I spilled it on the rug. No one yelled. No one guilt-tripped me. We just cleaned it up and kept laughing. And that's when I realized. I wasn't a daughter they lost. I was a woman they never really knew. They left me behind on a cruise. I left them behind in my story. And the version of me that returned, she never needed their permission to be free.